to know that I would never see her again. I'll never touch her again. I'd never be able to tell her I love her. It's just so hard.
On December 11th, 2021, the 23-year-old from Bridgeport was with a man she met on the dating app Bumble. The next morning, that man called 911 after finding her unresponsive. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled her death an accident, saying she died of a mixture of alcohol and drugs.
But the attorney's saying the family wants answers exactly about what happened. He says the city still has a lot of explaining to do.
When I hear songs of my sister, it's the worst. I start crying when I'm at work. And I see people that look like my sister, seeing black, beautiful young ladies. It makes me sad because I know I will never have my sister back.
So you telling me a 23-year-old goes to sleep after a first date and just don't wake up? And her family gotta find out from a piece of paper on the door? Make it make sense. December 2021, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Lauren Smith Fields. Remember that name because what happened to her and what didn't happen after is the kind of thing that'll have you heated. Her brother put it plain, to know that I would never see her again. I'll never touch her again. I'd never be able to tell her I love her. It's just so hard. December 11th, 2021. The 23-year-old from Bridgeport was out with a man she met on Bumble. By the next morning, that same man is calling 911 after finding her unresponsive. The medical examiner comes back and says it was an accident, mixture of alcohol and drugs. But look, the family, they want answers about what actually went down that night. When her brother hears songs that remind him of his sister, it breaks him. It's the worst, he said. I start crying when I'm at work, and I see people that look like my sister's skin, same black, beautiful young ladies. It makes me sad because I know I will never have my sister back. A 23-year-old goes to sleep after a first date and never wakes up. From the very beginning, Lauren Smith Fields' story was never just about one night. It was about a family's pain, a community's anger, and this haunting feeling that the truth was being pushed to the side. Her mother said it plainly, it is not natural for any parent to bury their 23-year-old child. No one is going to discard my daughter as if she were rubbish. So we're looking inside the case that shook Bridgeport, Connecticut. The discovery of Lauren's body in her own apartment. The autopsy that raised more questions than it answered. The investigative failures that had her family outraged. And the accountability battles that are still going on to this day. This is not just a story about loss. It's about the fight to make sure Lauren's name is remembered and her life doesn't get reduced to some police report. You're watching Shadow Crimes TV, where we bring true crime and domestic violence stories out of the shadows. Subscribe now and join us daily as we uncover the cases that demand to be heard. Don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Lauren Smith Fields was born January 23, 1998 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She grew up in a close-knit family, surrounded by 3 brothers and a mother who described her as a light who lit up every room. From early on, Lauren was sharp, driven, and deeply loved. She did her thing in school, went from Still Meadow Elementary to Stanford High, where she became a member of the National Honor Society, the Black Student Union, and the track and field team. Her favorite subjects? Biology and psychology. Early signs that she was leaning toward the medical field. After she graduated with honors, she went on to pursue nursing at Dutchess Community College. She was determined to make a real impact on the world. Outside the classroom, Lauren was all about fitness and living that plant-based lifestyle. She was disciplined, but she was also adventurous, traveling to places like London and Italy, posting snapshots of joy, laughter, and style.
Are you taking a picture or video?
Video.
Okay. Tell me when.
Go. I started it.
Her friends and family remember her as funny, outgoing, and deeply family-oriented. She was more than a headline. She was a daughter with a whole future ahead of her. By 23, Lauren, like a lot of people her age, was dipping her toes into online dating. She made a profile on Bumble, you know, that app where women make the first move. That's where she connected with 37-year-old Matthew LaFontaine, a local man from Connecticut. Reports described him as soft-spoken, polite, someone who shared her interests in travel and food. To Lauren, he seemed promising, a respectable match worth meeting in person. What started with curiosity and hope, it would soon set off a chain of events that changed everything. She had just been showing her brothers how excited she was about the possibility of a new relationship. She told one of them on the phone that he was white, that he seemed promising. There was hope in her voice, the kind of hope that comes with being young and curious about what might be next. That evening, December 11th, 2021, Matthew showed up at her apartment in Bridgeport carrying a bottle of tequila. He later told police that they started the night with drinks, taking shots and laughing before settling into food, games, and eventually a movie. But in his version of events, things started to turn. He said Lauren excused herself to the bathroom, that he could hear her getting sick. At one point, she went outside for a few minutes, telling him she had to meet her brother real quick. When she came back, she went to the bathroom again before joining him back in the living room. But her brother, he remembered that night very differently. He had no idea she even had a guest inside. He said when she came out to meet him, she looked normal, clear-eyed, steady, not drunk, not tired. To him, she seemed exactly like herself. He recalled something else too. Matthew had claimed Lauren asked him for $40 to get her nails done before their date. But her brother knew her nails were already done, freshly polished, and they certainly didn't need doing again. It was a small detail, but one that gnawed at the edges of Matthew's story. And so two conflicting pictures of the night start to emerge. Inside the apartment, Matthew's recalling a young woman falling ill and going to the bathroom repeatedly. Outside, her brother sees his sister calm and composed. Which image is closer to the truth? That question would only become more haunting in the hours that followed. Matthew said that as the night went on, Lauren eventually drifted off to sleep during the movie. He claimed he carried her into the bedroom, laid her on the bed, and settled in beside her around 3 a.m. He got up to use the bathroom. He said he could hear her snoring, and that sound reassured him. But by 6:30 in the morning, the sound was gone. When he woke again, Lauren was lying on her side, motionless. Blood had pooled from her right nostril onto the sheets. She wasn't breathing. He dialed 911 in a panic. The dispatcher instructed him to begin CPR until paramedics arrived. He said he tried, pressing down on her chest, but nothing worked. By the time emergency responders entered the apartment, it was already too late. Lauren Smith Fields was pronounced dead on the morning of December 12, 2021. For her family, the nightmare was only beginning. They didn't hear the news from police officers or detectives. Instead, when her mother went to check on her daughter after days of unanswered calls, she found a note taped to the apartment door. It listed a phone number. When she called, she was told the devastating truth. Her daughter was gone. She was promised that a detective would meet her soon to explain what had happened, but no one showed. Calls to the department were met with silence, or worse, abrupt hang-ups. It was as if Lauren's death, sudden and shocking, had slipped through the cracks. When the family finally entered the apartment themselves, what they saw shook them even more. The scene didn't look like it had been carefully processed. They noticed a bloody sheet still on the bed, cups and plates left out, a condom and a bottle of lubricant discarded, a small pill on the floor, liquor cups beside the tequila bottle. These were items that should have been collected immediately, yet they hadn't been. Incredulous, the family gathered what they could and later turned them over to investigators. For them, the lapse was more than negligence. It was a betrayal. Any potential evidence that might have explained how Lauren ended up unresponsive in her own bed was now compromised. In investigations, those first hours are sacred, the time when forensic teams should secure every item, document every detail, and preserve a timeline before it erodes. Every hour lost increases the chance that answers will never be found. Days later, the Connecticut Chief Medical Examiner released the official autopsy results. Lauren's cause of death was listed as acute intoxication from fentanyl combined with alcohol, promethazine, and hydroxyzine, substances that together slowed her system until it shut down. The manner of death, accident.
On December 11th, 2021, the 23-year-old from Bridgeport was with a man she met on the dating app Bumble. The next morning, that man called 911 after finding her unresponsive. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled her death an accident, saying she died of a mixture of alcohol and drugs. But the details of what led up to that are still unclear.
When they aren't notified when their loved one dies, and they come 2 days later to find a note on her door, the disregard and disrespect starts right there.
On paper, it was a straightforward classification, but for her family, it was unthinkable. Lauren wasn't a heavy drinker. She worked out daily. She followed a plant-based diet. She wasn't someone who sought out fentanyl. The image of their daughter did not match the portrait painted by toxicology. To them, the ruling felt like a dismissal, as though the medical system had stamped her life with a label rather than asked the harder question. How did these drugs get into her system? The word accident has weight in legal and investigative terms. It doesn't mean that nothing happened, only that the death wasn't deemed intentional. Yet in this case, the classification became a wall. With foul play not suspected, avenues that might have been pursued, cross-examinations, deeper forensic dives, treating the last known companion as a suspect never fully opened. Matthew LaFontaine, for his part, continued to cooperate. Police described him as visibly shaken, even trembling when they first spoke with him. He repeated his story about the drinks, the games, and carrying Lauren to bed. He denied that they had been intimate, but later indications suggested that wasn't entirely true. The contradiction raised eyebrows. If one detail could be false, what about the rest? And here lies the lingering question: when a healthy young woman dies suddenly in the company of someone she barely knew, how thoroughly should that person be scrutinized? Should the last companion be treated as a witness or as a suspect until proven otherwise? should every detail of his account be tested against physical evidence immediately, rather than weeks later? For Lauren's family, the answer was clear. The investigation hadn't just failed their daughter, it had left them with a wound that time and explanations could never close. As days turned into weeks with little movement from investigators, Lauren's family refused to stay quiet. They began speaking out publicly, voicing what they believed was not just negligence but indifference. They pointed to a painful reality: when young Black women go missing, are harmed, or die under suspicious circumstances, the urgency from authorities is often muted compared to other cases.
I see her in everything I do. Everything I do, I see her.
Chantel Fields and her family are still overcome with emotion a month after their daughter and sister, Lauren Smith Fields, was found inside her Bridgeport apartment.
I literally have PTSD when I see other beautiful Black women because of my sister, what happened to her.
Before her death, Lauren was a student at Norwalk Community College and had her own business. The family says on December 13th, that all changed when they learned she died. Bridgeport police say they received a call about an untimely death on December 12th and found Lauren's body inside her apartment. The family says they found out about her death through the landlord. They say they had to contact police to get answers about Lauren's case, but say after they continued to inquire about the investigation, they say they started having issues with the detective on the case.
He told me directly on the phone, stop calling me, and hung up in my face.
Right. Exactly.
Like, it was just total disrespect.
Exactly.
Like a family's going through grief.
The way how they talked to me, the way how they talked to my family, the way how they treated my daughter. They treated her like she was nobody, like she was not important.
Since those issues, the family has hired attorney Darnell Crossland in an effort to get answers and justice for Lauren.
We want an independent investigation by an independent state agency or federal agency to look into this. And we want DOJ, like in D.C., when they have to step in and deal with Mike Brown.
In a statement to NBC Connecticut, the city's police department says the Bridgeport Police Department offers its sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Miss Lauren Smith. We encourage anyone with any information to contact police. The family and attorneys say they saw that message, but want to know what happened to Lauren.
We want justice.
We want answers.
Yeah. I mean, whatever happened that night, we want to know. And we want to feel like that they care as much as we care.
I never get to touch her again. It's deplorable how they treated us.
Their words struck a nerve. On social media, clips of her mother saying, "No one is going to discard my daughter as if she were rubbish," began circulating. Friends echoed her light, describing Lauren as vibrant, funny, and determined. Slowly, the case began to gain traction online. That traction spilled into City Hall. Bridgeport's Mayor Joe Ganim acknowledged the growing storm. He issued a rare rebuke of his own police department, calling the handling of Lauren's case and another death investigated the same weekend unacceptable. His words carried weight.
I want to once again express my condolences to the families of Lauren Smith Fields and of Brenda Lee Rawls. And I want you to know that I am extremely disappointed with the leadership of the Bridgeport Police Department and have found the actions taken up to this point with regards to these two investigations unacceptable. After viewing these matters even more closely, and in the absence of the police chief, I've directed the deputy chief, Chief Baraha, to immediately put on administrative leave the two officers who are the subject of the Bridgeport Police Internal Affairs investigation for lack of sensitivity to the public, for failure to follow police policy in the handling of these two matters. In addition, the supervising officer who was in charge of overseeing these matters, has retired from the department this past Friday.
The disciplinary move wasn't about proving criminal wrongdoing, but about accountability for how the case was handled. Internal affairs probes ask, were policies followed? Was the family treated with the respect and urgency they deserved? Those are very different questions from a criminal investigation which asks whether someone can be charged with a crime. The two tracks run separately and often reach very different outcomes. Still, for Lauren's loved ones, the suspensions felt like at least a small acknowledgement that their daughter's life had not been treated with the dignity it deserved. And then a celebrity megaphone amplified the story to a national audience. Rapper Cardi B, who has never shied away from speaking on injustice, posted her outrage on social media. On January 23, 2022, what would have been Lauren's 24th birthday, Cardi B tweeted, "Nah, this man don't look old." And yet the media made it seem like she was with an old man looking to trick her. Connecticut, you failed young Lauren. Unfiltered and impossible to ignore. She followed up again with another sharp statement. Connecticut failed young Lauren. It's disgusting how they treated her case. Those posts went viral, sparking headlines nationwide. Cardi B reframed the narrative, shifting it from a local tragedy into a broader indictment of systemic failures. With her massive following, she drew eyes that had never heard Lauren's name before. The result was immediate. National outlets picked up the story. Pressure mounted on the Bridgeport Police Department to review its work, to answer why evidence was left behind, why the family wasn't notified promptly, and why the last man with Lauren had not been examined more critically. Community members organized marches in Bridgeport, including one on what would have been Lauren's birthday. Crowds of mourners and supporters chanting her name, carrying signs refusing to let her story fade. Cardi B's intervention didn't provide evidence. It didn't resolve forensic questions, but it did force attention. Public pressure can't replace an airtight investigation, but it can prevent a case from being swept aside. For Lauren Smith Fields, it meant her name would not be forgotten, and that at least was a form of power. Public attention brought momentum, but for Lauren's family, it wasn't enough to wait on promises. They knew they had to push further themselves. They launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for a private investigator determined to uncover what the police had overlooked. With the help of community support, they began requesting critical documents, body cam footage, the 911 call audio, lab reports, anything that could fill the gaping holes in the official narrative. To them, transparency wasn't a luxury. It was the only path to truth. Every missing piece, the condom uncollected, the bloody sheet left behind, the inconsistencies in Matthew's account felt like a locked door. They wanted those doors opened, but their fight also pointed to a larger issue, the way families are notified or not notified when tragedy strikes. In Lauren's case, her mother discovered her daughter was dead not from a call by police, but from a note taped to the apartment door. That indignity inspired a movement for change. The family and their supporters pushed for what they called Lauren's Law, a requirement that once police identify a deceased person, the family must be notified within 24 hours. The idea was simple but profound. No family should ever learn of their loved one's death in such a cruel and impersonal way. It was about more than procedure. It was about respect, about making sure compassion is baked into the very first step of tragedy. Whether or not criminal accountability would ever come, Lauren's Law was a legacy in action. Still, the family wanted more than policy. They wanted justice in the courts. In December 2023, they filed a sweeping federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Bridgeport and its police officers, alleging not just negligence but discrimination. They argued that the department had failed to investigate Lauren's death thoroughly, that evidence was mishandled, and that race had shaped the way her case was deprioritized.
Family of 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields announcing today they plan to launch a $30 million lawsuit against the city of Bridgeport. The family joined today by their attorney, Darnell D. Crosland, as they announced the lawsuit downtown. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled that the death of Smith Fields, who passed away in December of 2021, was accidental. But the attorney saying the family wants answers exactly about what happened. He says the city still has a lot of explaining to do.
They've come in the room, but they haven't come to the table. So they need to compensate this family for all of the damage they've been going through. And we're filing a lawsuit asking for $30 million to make this family whole again.
These are heavy claims, and in court the burden is high. Judges distinguish between heartbreaking outcomes and unconstitutional ones. To win, the plaintiffs would have to show not only that the investigation was flawed, but that their rights were violated in a way the law recognizes. The path was not easy. Early motions saw some claims dismissed outright and others dismissed without prejudice, leaving the door open to refile. But by February 2025, the family faced the harshest outcome yet. A federal judge threw the case out entirely, ruling that while the handling of Lauren's death was deeply troubling, it did not rise to the level of a constitutional violation. For her family, it was another blow, proof that the courtroom might never deliver the justice they sought. And as of this telling, no criminal charges have ever been filed in connection to Lauren's death. The man who spent that final night with her has never been accused of a crime, and investigators continue to stand by the classification of accidental death. That hasn't silenced questions. In fact, the deeper one looks, the more troubling they become. Consider the delay in processing the scene. Every day that passed without collecting evidence was a day DNA degraded, a day potential touch transfers faded, a day narrative filled the space where hard science should have been. Forensics is fragile, timing matters, and those early delays will always leave shadows in this case. Toxicology tells its own story, but even that is layered with nuance. Fentanyl is not just another drug, it is lethal in micrograms. Mixed with alcohol and sedating antihistamines like promethazine and hydroxyine, it creates a cocktail that slows breathing to a dangerous crawl. But was it taken knowingly? Was it given without her consent? These are questions toxicology alone cannot answer. And that's the problem with accident as a ruling. It ends the inquiry before intent is ever investigated. There is also a legal threshold the public often overlooks. Probable cause, the level of evidence needed to make an arrest, is not the same as proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is required to convict. But suspicion, contradiction, and inconsistencies, no matter how unsettling, are not in themselves enough. That space between what feels suspicious and what can be proven in court is where so many cases like Lauren's fall. The larger narrative only deepens when race enters the frame. Time and again, studies and stories reveal a pattern. Some victims' cases spark national manhunts, while others struggle for coverage. It is often called the missing white woman syndrome, a reflection of whose lives get urgency in the media and in law enforcement. In Lauren's case, headlines described her as being with an older white man, as if framing her choices was more important than investigating her death. The word overdose was repeated early and often, carrying a quiet judgment that risked reducing her to toxicology numbers rather than a vibrant human being. But Lauren was not statistics. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and her life cannot be reduced to a single ruling on a death certificate. Her family has said it again and again. She was not on drugs. She was disciplined, health conscious, intentional about her choices. Her brothers have recalled their own memories from that night. Her brother at the doorstep saying she looked fine, nails freshly done, nothing unusual in her demeanor. These recollections stand in tension with the official record, not as definitive proof, but as reminders that the truth of her final hours is still fractured. Holding that tension is part of honoring her story. And that brings us to what we still don't know. We don't know the full chain of custody of every piece of evidence collected or left behind. We don't know the complete results of all forensic tests, or whether everything was ever submitted to the state lab. We don't know the final word from the DEA's narcotics angle, or whether local internal affairs reviews will ever amount to real change. Most painfully, we don't know with certainty how fentanyl entered Lauren's system. Those gaps remain, and until they are closed, suspicion will always hover where answers should be. As this story closes, it must come back to Lauren herself. She should be remembered not as a case file, but as a young woman with plans, with laughter, with a future that stretched ahead of her. She should be here, celebrating her birthday, traveling, building her career, and living the life she worked so hard for. Instead, her family is left to fight for laws, for lawsuits, and for the dignity of her memory. Lauren Smith Fields should still be here, traveling, laughing, building the life she earned. Until every family gets swift answers, Lauren's name will remain a promise that dignity and diligence aren't favors, they're the baseline. Thanks for watching. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We bring you true crime stories daily, cases you know and ones you don't. Stay with us as we shine a light on shadowed stories that need to be heard, because every victim deserves to have their story told.